Hello, everybody. Welcome to Untethered.tv. I'm your host and the founder, Rob Woodbridge. But you know that. You also know why you come here each and every day. Come here to learn from these entrepreneurs that are paving the way, that are creating new industries in the mobile space as a result of mobile. Things that you do not even know you need, but you will eventually. That's why I love doing this. When innovation strikes, we track it down, or they track us down, and we bring them on the show. Today is no exception. I'm very excited about this opportunity to sit down with our guest. His name is Jonathan Kay. He's the founder of a company called Apptopia. Now, not every mobile app is a million seller. Those are corner cases like Angry Birds or Instagram. Maybe your idea will be one of those, but it's probably better that you go and buy a lottery ticket because the odds are highly against you that it will actually turn out that well for you. But what Jonathan does is he helps developers sell their apps. He's created the world's largest mobile app exchange at Apptopia.com. We're going to dive into the reasons why he did that, advice he has for mobile entrepreneurs, and insight into the app selling trends. So, what do you say we get to this? Jonathan Kay, co-founder and CEO of Apptopia. Jonathan, man, welcome. Really glad you could be here.
Thank you so much, man. That was so enthusiastic. I'm like, you got me excited. I didn't know it was coming.
I know me. And where are you located? Where's your company?
So we're Boston. We're a
Boston-based company, home of a great little nascent burgeoning mobile industry. I know Scavenger's down there and Seth and his guys. Is it a good place to be in business in the mobile space?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm obviously a little bit biased, right? But I think you have San Francisco and Boston and New York. We have like the most colleges in one location, and we work in Cambridge, which is like just a hotbed for it, right? So it's good, man. It's a good place. It's a good place to be.
And in that order, right? San Francisco, Boston, New York.
Right. Although I was just at an event in New York, and they are like clawing, with Cornell moving into New York. They are, if Boston doesn't pick it up, like we could quickly be number 3 on that list.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's hysterical. I didn't know, maybe there's a little controversy here around it. Who knows?
There's a lot of controversy around.
Well, I know a lot of people in New York City, and they will definitely say that they are a mobile hotbed. But I see this along the Eastern Seaboard. Austin, Texas, San Francisco, finally Silicon Valley because of all the investment. But I love that Boston is picking it up. I think that mobile makes it ripe for any place. Chicago to become the hub of mobile activity. So good to hear that Boston is still thriving. All right. Apptopia, absolutely. Tell everybody about this company because it is needed in this industry. It gives hope to entrepreneurs who have invested hours, days, years of their lives, sweat, blood, pounds off their body to be able to build a mobile application only to sell one app, give up in frustration and say, screw it, I'm never going back. Apptopia, talk about it because it's a very valuable service.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you. So essentially, we built a marketplace to broker mobile app acquisitions, right? And this might sound complicated, but it's not. We help you sell your ownership, your code, your users, the revenue, the intellectual property rights, right? Again, you said it well yourself. Instagram, this is such a ridiculous scenario, right? This is such an uncommon scenario, and the bottom line is that the 1.3 million mobile apps that exist, they're built by 300,000 developers, not the one guy who got Instagram sold. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to create an exit strategy for all those other developers, right? The guys that have mild success, good success, less success. And so we created an eBay-style platform that allows you to list your app and allows buyers to come and bid on and buy the app. And again, it's an acquisition. They're buying, every piece of that app.
We've seen listings on eBay for apps. We've seen all of it. So where was the inspiration? What was missing? I've seen a lot of exchanges of apps. People just getting fed up and selling apps for $100, $200, and people trying to accumulate apps. But what was the reason you start an entire business around this?
Yes, I mean there's a lot of reasons. Like I'll give you one quick story that kind of sparked it all. So my business partner, Ellie, he just a true entrepreneur. 2009, like the iPhone upgrades and now push notifications exist. So he's like, holy smokes, like I'm going to build an app called Gpush, which does push notifications for Gmail. Made an absurd amount of money for a couple months because, Google took a little time to catch up to this. And then two problems arise, right? Two problems. One, as a 21-year-old, developer, he had no idea what his mobile app was worth, right? So he knew that he was making thousands of dollars a day, but he had no idea what it was worth, right? You get $1,000 a day, you essentially think that that's never going to end, but of course it is, right? And so how do you value that? It's the financial valuation you use for an insurance company, these things didn't apply. And so he had two problems. One, he was done with it. He was bored, he was ADD, he wanted to move on to the next thing. He was done maintaining servers, but he couldn't walk away because there was value there. So he felt like tied to this project because there was value. Did he have to wait in it until it trickled down to nothing? Like what happened, right? So Google calls him up one day and says, we'll offer you X, thousands of dollars for this app, and our offer cuts in half tomorrow morning.
Come on.
Right? Because they can, of course.
Like, here's
Ridiculous.
the check, take it
ridiculous.
now, or you're done.
Right, or we'll ruin your lives forever, and your dog's life. But the bottom line is that, he didn't know what to do. He didn't know if he should sell it. He didn't know if he was getting lowballed. He didn't know, should he tweet about it, blog about it? Like, how do you get promotion for this? How do you do this? Because there's something of value, right? And you can't just walk away from it. And so it was this frustration, 2 or 3 years ago that kind of started this idea brewing. And what happened is that Ellie and I essentially knew that the market wasn't ready for the idea and that the market needed to be saturated enough to a point that there needed to become a second market, which is what this is, right? It's a second market for mobile apps. And so, it was partly this frustration. The only other reason I would say that we really started it is that we saw a huge discrepancy in skill sets. So, just like yourself, Rob, like I'm really into the entrepreneurial world, and I love learning from people that are smarter and more successful than myself. And when you hear about these successful businesses, there's often a real technical mastermind, and there's often like an evangelist, the guy who just knows how to make money, knows how to grow the business, knows how to support it. And what happened is that in the mobile world, it just became the lowest barrier of entry to start a business. And so you had all these really, really technical hackers building businesses without that other half, right? Without the person who understood psychology and game mechanics, right? And it just blew out of proportion to the point where I bet you most people not making money right now, it's because they're missing this other part of the brain that they need in order to build a successful business.
Making part of the brain. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I see it all the time. I mean, I tell this story around some of my partners in the mobile space where they said, look, we don't need sales and marketing. Fire them all. We'll just use the App Store. There's our sales, marketing, and distribution channel. And when I pick my jaw up off the floor and refrain from slapping the person across the face, that's the mentality. It's pervasive. It's an engineering mind that says, I don't need sales and marketing. Finally, we're going to show how useless they are, but you do need that. You need somebody to stand on a soapbox and do this properly, or else you end up selling 1 or 2 apps and going away and going back to your government job.
Or you get one spike, you make $1,200, and then you never make any money again,
so, yeah,
right?
exactly. It's the trough of despair comes in the app market faster, and it's more painful because you put so much effort. Some people put months and months and months into developing a game, an app, or something like that, and they put it out to the market, and they put all their effort in the launch, and not the day after the launch. So the launch goes up, and then the day 2 it goes right down, and then it's depression right after that. It's like I can't even describe it. You see just sullen faces. And they go back to their waitering job. So, but it is a business, right? And while there's massive opportunity, you still have to think of it like a business. And just like what you're doing with Apptopia, it's a business that there's a need for this. So people come, they list their app. Walk through the process. They list their app on the site, and then they put a time limit on. They put a price that they'd like to sell it for. How is it that clear, like eBay?
Yeah. So, the only thing I would add is that we essentially authenticate into your developer account. So it's a little bit rare that we actually ask for developer credentials. The reason we do this is it allows us to actually screen scrape data from your Google Play account, from your iTunes Connect account, and we actually create the listing page for you. You add the necessary information like what type of auction do you want to do, right? Do you want it to be bidding? Do you want it to be buy it now? Do you want it to be both? What's the price? You add notes like about your app, developer notes, but the description, the screenshots, the icon, and your download and sales data, we pull this directly from the store.
So you don't hide anything.
And we update it. No. This is like one of the best parts about the site, at least in my opinion, because it allows buyers to make really educated decisions. And it allows me to actually say to them, I stand completely behind the numbers on our site. We personally pull them directly from the store. We personally update them every single day. And so these are real numbers, hold us liable. We're, a value add middleman, right? And the bottom line is anyone who's buying an app and not looking at these types of numbers is probably not making an educated decision. And there's a problem there.
But the buyers, the sellers actually determine what the price is. So they say, listen, I feel like this is a minimum bid of, like I'm looking at one right now, Host Stand. It's right on the front page of the site. And I'll pull it up here. And it's a minimum bid of $6,000. Yep. You can buy it now for $10,000. But it says that the last 13 weeks of total revenue was $41, and the number of downloads or purchases is kind of stagnant at 3, and with a 1-star review. So, I mean, that's not going to sell. I mean, I'm not smart, but
this app will not sell.
That's right.
At that price.
I mean, how do you pull all that information? But then do you give them a recommendation that says, you know what, that's like an $80 app, right?
Yeah. No. It's actually a fantastic question, right? And so we're doing a couple things. So one is that today you email valuation at Apptopia, and I will have a lengthy conversation with you, and I'll give you a recommendation. So, excuse me. Realistically, I have at least one person every day who does.
But that's what you want.
So at least one person. No, this is absolutely what I want, right? And believe it or not, these apps are much, much more likely to sell, right? However, this isn't a scalable solution. What we're doing in the meantime is we're building out a platform called myappvalue.com, which essentially takes both me and my partner's experience with understanding valuation and acquisitions. I mean, me personally, I probably spoke to 600 different mobile app buyers. And so having these conversations and understanding like what they want, what they'll pay for, what they won't pay for, it's invaluable, right? And so my gut, I'm actually able to make a really good gut call on what valuations are. Also, we run this algorithm against the precedent of every app that's ever sold on our marketplace and every bid that's ever gone in. And so this will become a very automated engine where you can actually authenticate in again with your developer credentials. We'll pull all your apps, run them against our algorithm, and create a report that not only shows you what the value is on a standard deviation curve. So, are you more likely to get this price? Or are you less likely to get that price? It will break it down into 7 or 8 different categories, Rob, and give you actionable advice, saying here's the number that we used, here's where you stack up, and here's how you can do it better.
See, that's why when I look at the mobile space and I look at the apps that are being created and the data that's being collected, and that the data is the most valuable piece for most of these apps, right? It's not the software, it's the fact that you've been able to collect some of this data. Same thing with you guys. Obviously, the more apps that come into the system, the greater and greater amount of data that you're collecting, the more help you can be. You can actually do an assessment at the end of it. What I'm assuming is that when you get enough data, that it would say your grade is a C- for getting that price. So here are the 9 recommendations we would do. It's like, drop your price, do this, do this, do this, and then be able to basically create a slider that allows them to sell their app with the least amount of friction as possible. That's cool.
Yeah, you make a great point. And like our end game, at least right now, is that we never want someone to sell it for half of what we think or more than double. And so once this algorithm is created, we'll automatically run it, and we'll if they try and list it for double or they try and list it for less than half, we'll send them a red flag saying, here's what you have to do and why. Ultimately, we need to let them list it for what they want, because this is very important. Developers don't like being told what to do. So I've learned. But we're going to provide strong recommendations.
Yeah, it's not like happy wife, happy life. It's like happy. There's got to be something that rhymes with developer, right? Because happy engineer. Yeah, exactly. It's so true. I love engineers, but you're right. There's a particular feel to it that, listen, this is, they know best all the time. And when it comes to the business side, there are a ton of engineers that are running companies right now that get it, that understand it, that live and breathe it, that have a balance, a left and right brain for what a business is. But for the most part, the amateurs on the development side really need some help and some guidance. And I think that's one of the big things. What I love about it is that the coverage that you've received around this, this is a secondary market, and you've been covered in like TechCrunch and my good friends over at GigaOM. You've been Entrepreneur Magazine, Mashable. What did that do for the number of apps that have been coming through to you? Did that just skyrocket it, or was there any value in those guys?
Yeah, so it's funny. The value was actually more on the buyer side.
Oh, interesting.
Because with the exception of GigaOM, and maybe TechCrunch, these are like, developers are not reading this, right? Developers are reading Fandroid, they're reading TUAW, they're reading All Things Digital. You know what I mean? They're reading slightly different publications. So what happened is that we actually built the marketplace offline before we built it online. So when we launched the product, Rob, we had almost 100, 150 developers ready to go. And it was a matter of like getting their apps in there, getting them priced correctly, and bringing buyers to the site and kind of proving credibility. So those more than anything, they just proved out the concept. They got buyers, they sold apps, they got bids on the marketplace.
Because I'm going to assume that part of this is not, is attracting the apps. Part of it is attracting the buyers. But that combined number has to go up. Right, and that's where you're going to start to see success. You're going to see more apps being bid on, a little bit more of a competition. People's apps garnering more revenue opportunities, right? So that they're not leaving money on the table. How does that play into what you're doing? How do you build that audience? Because that's tough. Because you're now in the awareness game, just like the app makers were trying to get into the awareness game.
Yeah, it's a good question, and like you probably see me smiling so big, because I'm reading this book right now that like is changing my life.
What is it?
Well, it's not even. I mean, everyone's probably
Crossing the Chasm. Yep.
Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore. Yeah. So it's like, I mean, this book is just like speaking to me, right? And the crypt version is that the more credibility you build, the more you prove out your concept, the more the people that feel less comfortable with your site will come to your site or use your product or drink your Kool-Aid, whatever it may be. And so honestly, right now, my biggest focus is on sales. And, I have 5 or 6, very big players in the mobile space who don't need education. They see our marketplace and they're like, holy shit, you're making my life so much easier. And that's amazing. And, we're on the verge of putting a large number of deals through the site in about the next week. And so my hypothesis is that this then makes it more newsworthy again, right? So we're working with Forbes, and like they want to cover the fact that we're going to be launching this really big app sale. And then when you see that there's a really big app sale, these hundreds of people who visit my site every day and don't do anything, now they do something, right? And so this is kind of the mentality that I'm taking in terms of marketing, and it's proof by content. Like, you know what I mean? I'm just going to sell them, show you it's real, and if you want to go talk to the developer who just got a check for $12,000, I'm more than happy to introduce.
Yeah, you got to facilitate that introduction quickly, right? Happy customers. Well, Crossing the Chasm is a good book. I'll give you another one. I'm just putting it up on the screen. You're not going to see this, though, but it's called Double Double by Cameron Harold. It's how to double your revenue and profit in 3 years or less. It's pretty straightforward. It's all about focus. I just saw him speak recently, and he's a very enigmatic speaker. He's got this great visioning platform, but I'm not an affiliate. I don't get affiliate sales. I'll just recommend some books. Crossing the Chasm by Moore is one of them. Double Double is another one. This guy, he built 1-800-GOT-JUNK. Took it from $2 million to like $108 million. No investment, all profit. Worth the read.
This is so funny, man. He was like a mentor of mine. So I used to run the marketing department at grasshopper.com for the last 3 years. And he was close with David Hauser, who was the founder of Grasshopper. And we built like a lot of our marketing function beyond his idea of like how you reach out to people in the press and how you do marketing. And so I've definitely come across Double Double before. Cameron's a really smart guy.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, it is. And his PR campaigns are pretty impressive. The amount of activity that they've had for a junk towing company. It's amazing.
Yeah, seriously.
Away from that, how many apps do you list? I mean, how many apps are you seeing growth there in the number of apps that you're getting in, and how many do you have listed, and how many have you sold? What are some numbers that we can latch on to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're at 215 listings right now. This number is growing. However, it's like the numbers grow based on where we put our effort, which is really interesting. And so we were really, really focused on developers for a minute. And then I had this epiphany. I had this like moment of clarity where I was like, you know, you schmuck, you need to just sell as many apps as you possibly can. And then when developers see how you're making these other developers like a lot of money, they'll just come. And that's like an actual fair hypothesis. So we actually stopped a little bit with the developers, and we're pushing really hard on the buyers right now, which I think is going to be a valuable strategy. And so as of like this moment today, we've sold about $30,000 worth of apps, which probably equals about 9 or 10 different apps in that number. Having said that, well, we have a lot of apps in pending right now. So I have 6 apps that have been purchased but haven't been transferred. And this will probably make up another $20,000 to $25,000 in sales. So we'll be well over 50. We'll be closer to $60,000 in total apps sold by probably Memorial Day or the day after.
The important thing to remember is that you launched when? April, right?
Yeah, we launched like 6 or 7 weeks ago, which is really it's impressive. I mean, it's cool to see that we're able to sell that much. And
did you have any expectations about what you thought you could sell in this period of time? Or, I mean, you're paving the way. It's exactly why we're speaking, is that there's no business model for this out there. You might, in the mobile space, you're dealing in intellectual property. There is eBay, but that, you know, you can buy a broom or a car on eBay, and but this is really about apps. Right. So there's no shining beacon in this industry. So what were your expectations?
Well, I'll tell you, the expectations we set for our investors were that we wouldn't sell an app until June 1st.
Okay, so you.
So they are very smiling investors. And I mean, you know what, man? We thought we would sell 1 or 2 a month. We thought we would sell 1 or 2 a month because we thought that the buyers would require a lot of education, and they do. But the point is that we've realized that the buyers who are already in mobile, they get it. They're like, this is a lower barrier of entry to what I was already going to do. Like, amazing, you know? And so
what kind of, you know, maybe there's a perception here, Jonathan, around like these are the low of the low, the dead apps, the guys that, you know, the long of the long tail that aren't able to you know, get around because simply they aren't good apps. How do you get over that perception that these apps, it's not like a garage sale for apps?
Yeah, so I mean, there's 2 things. I'll give you one specific example, but the more general statement, Rob, is that we're selling apps for average of $4,000 or $5,000. Okay, and this goes as low as 500 right now, and I think our highest is about 12,000. And so it's like if you just talk to a group of 25 mobile app developers that aren't shops, they're not making $5,000 per app. And if they were, they wouldn't be working at their other jobs, right? Because they'd be making more than the average American salary. And so it's like people need to realize is that, you know, we're not a junkyard. We might be selling apps that are struggling for one reason or another. But the bottom line is that when you get $5,000 and you eliminate all risk, time value of money, right? You don't have to wait a year to get this. The next push out that Apple pushes out doesn't ruin your game and you have to refactor it. It's like you get $5,000 today, right? That's good. That's really amazing. And the specific example I'll give you is that one of the bigger apps we sold was an app called Grablocks, and we sold it for $10,000 to a medium-sized development shop. We sold this app in the 7th week that it was in Google Play. Okay, and like we sold it based on the fact that it had unbelievable design, it had really interesting game mechanics, and it was getting about 10 5-star reviews a day. And it was getting reviews at about half the rate that normal apps would get reviews. So the general industry standard is like 1,000 downloads, you get 1 rating or review, maybe positive or negative. They were coming in around 500. And so while they didn't have 100,000 downloads, it showed that the people that used the game loved it, right? And so this app development shop, they essentially had all their engineers play the game. And they said, how long would it take you to replicate this? And they said it would probably take us about 2 months and $10,000. And so they said, well, I don't want to take you off the project you're currently working on. I want the game today. And you know what? I was able to see that the market already responded positively to this game. So not only do I get it for the cost that it would cost me to build it, but I already know how the market reacts to it. And this is so, so important, Rob, because people value their apps based on how long it took them to build it, and you can't do that. Because the bottom line is that once you take a car out of the shop, it decreases in value because it's not new anymore. And once you launch an app to the marketplace, the hope, this grandiose hope that you're going to make $1 million, it's realized or it's not realized, right? And so you have to pay, good or bad, for this market reaction to your app.
I love that story simply because there are a lot of these apps out there that are. I mean, I ran a company for 4 years and we did really well for a small company, but I kept on looking at this app that we were building. It was called Mobile Admin, and I always kept on thinking that all this needs is a 100-person sales force with an established channel, and this thing would blow up. This is a $50 million product, right? And it is. It's now in somebody else's sales channel, and it is escalating to that very quickly. But sometimes you just need that. It's a great product. It's not good. It's not bad, but it's not doing what you need to do. You got to cut your losses. And it's interesting because folks like RIM now have this thing for BlackBerry OS 10 that's coming out, which is they're going to give you $10,000 guaranteed that in your first year of your app, you're going to make $10,000 off of the app. And if you don't as a developer, they're going to write you a check for the difference between your app's revenue generated and the money. And I thought, it's good that they're doing that. I think it's healthy for them it's going to bring developers in. But if you gave me a choice and said, listen, you know what? I don't want to just make $10,000 a year in this app, in this app world. So if you give me a choice, I can maybe put it up on Apptopia and sell it for $10,000 tomorrow, or wait a year to collect a check. I'm gonna take the 10 grand today, right? Right. As a guarantee, as opposed to waiting for an entire year. But it's true. These apps aren't dumb. They're not dead. They're just maybe in the wrong spot, selling the wrong way, and a company can come in and accelerate that. They see the opportunity where most people don't. I like that.
Absolutely. And you just brought up an interesting point, by the way.
I do that every once in a while.
I just want to say that, you've done it a lot. You're throwing me here. So it's not always that you need a salesperson to have a successful app. So we just sold a soccer scores app for $4,000 on our site, right? And the reason that it got purchased was because the buyers, they have a soccer game. And so what could be better than advertising to people who are playing a soccer game, soccer scores? Right? And so oftentimes it's just waiting for the right buyer. You know what I mean? And so people get impatient. They're like, my app didn't sell. It's been 3 weeks. And I'm like, listen, it's all about the right buyer, because they might have the exact distribution that just matches up perfectly.
And that's important. When I talk to entrepreneurs like yourself, guys who are building these mobile applications as well, is that they, the ones that seem to win are the guys that are taking a product into an existing market, right? So there's an audience waiting for it. As much as we love to pave the way, there's an audience waiting for it. And this is exactly that. Find a complementary piece of technology, another app that allows you to drive 2 apps to drive revenue instead of just a single app. And we're going to talk about that because that's a strategy. And I think that's what happens here, is that people get so focused on their one app that they forget the second and third and the requirement that those have in helping you drive up activity for generating revenue from all the apps. I do have a question though. How do you list an app in a marketplace without spooking the users? I think all of us have been in this situation. We're younger. We're renting a house. We're renting an apartment. The owner comes by and says, it's for sale. And, that means that one of two things are happening. Either you're evicting me, or I've made up my mind because I'm going to go find a place, because eventually maybe the new owner is going to evict me. So I give up on the place that I'm living in and I go and find a new place. And even though I may have liked it, same thing with an app, is that if I'm using it and I somehow come across the fact that the owner's trying to sell it, what does that do? How do you deal with that without spooking the users?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And surprisingly, I don't personally think it's a problem. I mean, the Instagram users, because they're purchased by Facebook, this was good for them. They now have a more seamless way to post to Facebook, right? Like, and so the bottom line is that what happens is that most of these acquisitions, and not everyone, right? Like, let's be real. There will be some people who will probably, you know what I mean, won't be the knight in shining armor. But the bottom line is that most of the ones that we're seeing, they're trying to make something better. They're trying to make it easier to get coins so you can buy rockets for that ship, right? They're trying to like do something that makes your experience better, because the bottom line is if you as the user don't give them money, then it was a bad investment. And when do you give someone money? When you're having a good experience, when you're having fun, when you're happy, when you're enjoying yourself, right? And so it's almost counterintuitive to the new buyer to you know, hurt your experience. And the other thing is that your app is downloaded locally on your phone. So, you know, even if it changes hands,
you own it,
and they close it down, you still have access to this app. It's not going to really affect your experience, other than you might just not be able to get updates.
And I think it's true. It's just, I always have that, you know, the fear of spooking, you know, when any kind of ownership or change, it's like, is it really going to happen? And nobody knows what's going to happen with Instagram and Facebook. There was a little bit of a backlash, but you know, I think the backlash was, I think they added 20 million users overnight as a result of the acquisition, Facebook's acquisition.
Right.
You mentioned investors. So you've raised money to get this going?
Absolutely. So we probably raised just under $500,000 in terms of capital. Essentially we had some guys who took a chance on us before we even had built the product. And what happened is that we launched the product, we started closing sales, they were like, oh boy, and they doubled down. And so that's kind of got us to where we are today. We're about to raise a much bigger round, but we have more than enough capital for the foreseeable future at this point.
I like that. You know, take what you can during the time where the valuations are great, but then don't get silly in the amount that you pull in simply because you can. Then you make some silly decisions around how you're going to spend it. You got to take your eye off the ball. Was it hard to raise?
It's interesting. No, and it's so weird. Like it was. We got very fortunate, right? It's definitely harder to raise the bigger round that we're raising now. We got very fortunate that we found these guys in New York called Expansion VC, who just they got it. They were like, it makes zero sense to me that this doesn't exist, and they were like, you two entrepreneurs are absolutely insane, and we think that that's really valuable for the company, right? They just essentially saw that we were going to eventually succeed as people, and so they wanted to go along for the ride. And then the bottom line is that there's very few businesses that in their first 2 months bring in that much just money, right? It's like, obviously that's not even close to all profit for us, but because we need to pay out the developers, but there's just very few businesses. Like when you really hear people pitch, they're like, we're building this and it's going to be the best subscription and we're going to acquire all these users. And I'm like, listen, we've sold $50,000 worth of apps. And this kind of helps you really stand out. You know?
Well, it really does, and especially if there's a way to monetize from what you're doing. Is that you know, it's such a bandied around term, but there's got to be, what is your revenue model for this?
Yeah, so we take 15% of the transaction.
Yeah,
it's that simple, man. It's really that simple. There will be other ways that we monetize moving forward, right? So, you know, just to give you an example where we've been tracking a lot about apps that are on the homepage. And apps on the homepage tend to, I mean, this host example is a terrible, terrible example that you pulled, but I mean, they get a lot of traffic. They get a lot of views. They're more likely to get bids on them. And so eventually, if you're selling your app for $7,000 to pay like $200 to be listed on the homepage and increase your likelihood of selling, this becomes a non-issue, right? But it will always be 15%. And the bottom line is that we've gotten almost no pushback on this because we're writing the developer a check, right? We're not making money without giving you money as well, you know? So it's kind of an easier proposition.
It is. Like there's no risk for them because you succeed when they succeed. So it's in your best interest to help them succeed because then you get paid. I was thinking about the two companies. I think it's called Scribe SEO, which is a WordPress plugin. It has nothing to do with mobile. And and MailChimp. And, you know, a few things here that I really like about these business models that they use. Like MailChimp gives away I've been a MailChimp user. God love them for Untether's newsletter. I send out a daily newsletter to a big email list, and I still have a free account, right? I'm sending out upwards, and I run Mobile Mondays in Ottawa as well. And I'm sending out probably, I mean, I can't even tell you how many emails I'm sending out. I'm sending out thousands and thousands of emails every month, and they're not charging me for any of it, which is great for me. But, you know, I don't know how they make money, but there's two things. One, MailChimp has this thing that if you want to test your email for spam readability, so it's just going to get caught in a spam filter, they charge you. It's like $2. Right? But I love that.
Right.
It's in addition to their features. I can subscribe to them, but here's an additional feature that they'll charge me. Same thing with Scribe SEO. It's like a $20 a month subscription that when I do a post on a blog, it will vet for SEO and for a search engine compatibility and search engine marketing. It'll tell me what to change and where to change and put the weight on this and bring. And I love these little services like that are inexpensive, $20 or $2 a hit. But they really provide tremendous value. And I think there's opportunities obviously there for you above that 15%, just to be able to say, hey, you know what? If you do these 9 things or 5 things, or if you change this, the likelihood of you being sold is much higher. And you charge $10 for that assessment or something like that, right? Automated. But
and that's what we'll start to get into, right? It's like, for me, I want to tie other fees to value, like directly to value add. You know what I mean? And I think that's what you were describing with MailChimp, right?
You just cut to the chase. I just like to talk a lot. It's exactly. But like, you know, I get excited about this because, you know, the 15% is like your standard fare. This is what you get on a transaction. It's the services that lead up to that. So I think about, for example, you know, you might have a catalog company, or a company like, there's a company in Ottawa, Magmic Mobile Game Company, but they are also a publisher. They're looking for ways to complement their portfolio of games. And they could do an assessment that says, listen, we're thinking of building, you know, a first-person shooter that does this on Android and iOS. What do we think that we can expect the value of that application to be? You have that data, right? Which I think is a pretty cool thing. Yeah. You know, like you can look at expanding that because they can make an assessment. Well, it's either going to cost us, as you said, 3 months, 4 months of development time, the expected value is going to be this, and sales and downloads are going to be this, or we can just look at something right away and see if we can get that into the shop right away. And I love that kind of stuff, man. Jonathan, you're on to something.
Let's hope so.
So who's buying the apps? Like, you know, is there a profile of somebody that's buying these apps? Is it, or is it just all over the place right now? It's too soon for you to know.
No. So, I mean, I have 3 basic buyer profiles that I think have been, one way or another, like almost all the acquisitions I've fallen into. And so I guess one is this example that I like to say. Do you ever notice that like a pizza shop in your town closes down and another pizza shop opens up? And you're like, what the hell, right? Like there was something wrong. This guy must have been like, your menu sucks. You need to offer free delivery. Your calzones were too small. You didn't toast your wraps.
But
right?
the next guy fails, and then another pizza shop opens up.
No, because like you as a human being must see something that this person is doing incorrectly that you can do better. And so the first use case is developers. Developers are buying other developers' apps because they look at them and they're like, you know what? It would take me more time to build this than the $3,000 or $4,000 I can buy it for. And you're screwing up something major, and I know exactly how to fix that, right? And so you have developers as one. The second is that you have, and I'm going to separate developers with like big mobile shops, because big mobile shops can be big mobile advertising companies, big mobile development companies, big mobile marketing companies, but big mobile shops in general, for them, very often, the more apps that they put in their funnel, the more money that they make. And of course, it's more logical than that. They can't just take any app and put it in. There's a rhyme and a reason. They have specific gaps they're trying to fill. There's real logic to it. But for them, they're actually losing money because it takes them a certain amount of time to build it. So they see like Apptopia as an unbelievable way to fill in all these gaps to acquire apps at a quicker and less expensive pace than they could to build them from scratch. Because the bottom line is they're going to pay, 60, 70% more to build the app from scratch. And even if you take Rovio as an example, they're batting like 5% on all their apps that they've built. So why not buy 25 apps for, 30% of the cost if, that they're not all going to succeed anyway, right? And so we have mobile app shops and holding companies and big portfolios that see us as a really, really good, quick, inexpensive way to get involved. And the third example is entrepreneurs and businesses. So anyone from we're working with a couple Fortune 500 companies and a couple public companies right now, but we're also working with Joe, business owner of Zarly, or of these successful companies, because they essentially look at it, and this comes into what we were talking about before, Rob, where they're like, I have a business skill set. I understand X, Y, and Z. You have built a good app. You've designed a good app, but you're completely missing out on X, Y, and Z. Why isn't there any virtual goods? Why can't I unlock anything? There's no hook. You're not teaching them how to use the game. You're not answering support emails. All of these business, these things that really help a business, these apps grow. This third party, they come in and they're so much that right brain that they can come in and actually, you've already done the technical piece. They can come in and help take it to another level.
Well, it's you never think about that. Is that I've worked with a lot of companies, and we had a call last week, and I've worked with a lot of companies that they're building their first app. They've made a career out of their first app. It's 9 months in development, and they're about to launch, and there's a flourish, and then it dawns on them when they go through that trough of despair. They've hit the peak. They've sold all they're going to sell. Things are starting to decline in this race to zero, which is this mobile app economy. That they don't have anything to bump it up, right? So they start to affect their price. They change the price. They drop it down very quickly, and it starts to kind of float down instead of plummet. Their follow-up app is 6 months down the road. Not an acceptable thing here, right? So in between those two apps, which are your crowning glories that you're building, that you're going to do anyways, what can you do? How do you bring something else in 6 weeks, 8 weeks after your last launch? So there's continuous launches between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 apps. You've got to. There's no other way to do this unless you're building out crap, right?
No, it's true. The people who are most successful in my market, they have 20 apps in their portfolio, right? And they understand the demographics of their users, and they have users that go across all platforms, right? They're really capitalizing on that. It's not the person who has one app or two apps, not anymore.
So is there a specific genre of apps that you're seeing take hold more than others?
Yeah, so I was actually kind of giving this some thought before the call because I figured you'd want to know what's selling, right? And I'm going to give two suggestions, but I think that there's a unifying reason why they're both like that. So the first is puzzle games and logic games, okay? And the reason is that games are the most they're the quickest. The thing that you can make the most money on in the shortest period of time is games. However, and let's take an example from Backflip Studios, which is, for those people listening, probably one of the top 5 biggest game studios in the entire game right now. They launch a game like Ragdolls, okay, which is a game that they recently launched. They push it out. It gets featured by Apple. This is not a problem. They make money on this game for 3 months. I don't think that they make any more money on this game for 3 months, right? Because me and everyone else who's in this demographic, who's a casual gamer, I'm like, I will pay 99 cents to be entertained on the subway ride for the next 2 days. No problem. No questions asked. I beat all the levels, I delete the game, and I never, ever look at it again. And so they never make any more money on that than in those 3 months, okay? They're able to push out these types of games very quickly and at a very high quality, so they're able to make a lot of money off of it. However, puzzle games, logic games, mind games, things that make you think, like games like Free Cell, which have no end. There's an unlimited amount of combinations. These games, they make a lot of money because they have the virality of the game industry, but there's no end point. You don't beat all the levels, right? You keep thinking it out. You keep playing. Like my parents who are 65, they have this word game that they play every freaking night. I can't imagine how much money they've made this developer. like a real tangible amount of money, you know? And it's because it's an endless amount of combinations. You can keep
I
playing
love it.
and so I think puzzle games are dangerous, like dangerous in a good way. And the second one, and I wouldn't have not have even thought of this, but I've had like 3 or 4 massive buyers all ask for casino games. Anything and everything that is related to casino. And again, this hits on the same point. There's game mechanics, so it's fun. However, there's no end. You can play as many hands of blackjack as you want. You can play Texas Hold'em until you're blue in the face. You can pull as many slot machines as you want or play roulette forever and ever and ever because there's no end point, right? And so this is what made utility games and productivity games so valuable. But they weren't games. They only had, you know, your flashlight you only need if there's a need. A game, there's no need. It's a consistent need. And so if you can combine the consistent need with a never end, then I think you're in a very good situation.
And it's true. You know, a lot of companies that, so Magmic is the game company I ran for a number of years, and we had card games. They were the number one sellers. You know, we had blackjack, we had, solitaire, we had even mahjong, right? These are big games for them that all of us, that because, as you said, you got to kill 15 minutes. Well, it never ends. It's like it's a deck of cards that you carry with you all the time, and I like that. It's great,
Absolutely.
and I don't think that it should be any different than that. Everything else, it seems to be a little bit more complicated to explain what the value is of this, and we know, we've seen OMG Pop get sold to Zynga. And then, 2 weeks after that insane sale, the number of users plummets, right? It drops off because it is just a passing game. It's just a passing thing. We don't talk about the game anymore, right? It's not in the popular vernacular anymore. All right. So if I'm selling an app, okay, how do I make sure that I can use your service effectively? This is my last question. It's a long one though. What advice do you have for developers who are out there? Maybe there's 2 things here. One of them is, when should you sell your app? I'm out there, I'm stubborn as hell. I've got this app, I've worked so hard on it. There's no way I'm going to sell it. And if I do, I'm not going to just sell it for $5,000, as you said, because of the effort that I've put into it is far greater than that. So when should developers sell? And then how do they prep it so that they can sell effectively? Do you have any advice for these guys?
At first, I just have to say what you just described is literally 20% of the emails in my email box as we speak. Like, you are just spot on.
Nice.
And so the answer is pretty clear, man. It's pretty clear, right? You should sell when money is the number one priority, right? Because I'll tell you, I was just talking to someone, and I'm not going to share the name for obvious reasons, but I got him a $10,000 on an app. $10,000 offer on an app that he has made cumulative of $350 over its 4-month life. Okay? And, the bottom line is that he wanted $15,000 for it, right? He wanted more. And I said, listen, I've spoke to the biggest buyers that I could. You have a great game. We can get you $10,000 for it. I obviously want to get you 15. I can't. I'll only get you 10. And he didn't sell. And the only reason that I can possibly understand for that is that money is not the priority, right? There's an emotional connection to the game that's more important than the money, right? And so when money is the number one priority, and you're building the game not just to have fun and build a game, but when you're building it to make money, you should come to Apptopia, right? Because this is what we do. We get you the most amount of money that we can for an app. And sometimes the harsh reality is that that's only a couple $1,000s. But if that's the case, it's because you had no other way to get to a couple $1,000s, or it would have taken you over a year time to make that couple $1,000s. And very few apps do have consistent revenues for over a year. And so we give you a no-risk way to make that money. And so I think that's just what it comes down to. And you can put your emotional connection aside, and when you just want to make money.
Great answer. It's a great answer. But I still think that entrepreneurs, and this, is like, this thing could be on life support. It could be mangled and destroyed and every bone broken, and there's nothing left. There's no life left, no spark. And the entrepreneur's like, no, it's still alive. I can do it. It's still worth more than this. So You know, I think that there's, you know, then it becomes a psychological thing, and you get into counseling, I suppose, at that point, Jonathan. You bring in the couch, you sit the entrepreneur down, you say,
Yeah.
look, it's dead, right?
Well, I'm saying this is the problem with stocks. And like, I don't know if you've ever invested in stocks, but I can tell you I've done this myself. You ride it until it's dead. You ride it until it's dead, even though there's $1,000 in there. And $1,000 is maybe, you know, 100 dates with your wife or your significant other. But you're just throwing it out because you refuse to just accept the loss until it goes down to zero.
Well, it's how Vegas makes a living, right?
Right. And then, like, the logic is this is bullshit, right? This is bullshit, and like, you should take $1,000 and like we'll help you do that, you know.
So what do you what how do you what do you do with them to get their app ready? I mean, what can they do to, once they've made that decision to sell their app, they've gotten over it, they want to get rid of it, how, you know, what are the tips that they should be able to do that bring this to a conclusion that they should be happy with?
Absolutely. So it's a bunch of things. I'll start with some simple ones. The first one is that statistics are so important. If your app sucks or if it's fantastic, statistics are so important, okay? And there is no longer any excuse for not having stats on your app, okay? There are a couple basic accepted things. Google Play and iTunes Connect provide very baseline stats. They're not so helpful, okay? Flurry Analytics and Localytics both are massive mobile analytics companies that are easy to integrate. And for indie developers, for developers that have a handful of apps, they're free. They're free services. So it's like, even if you don't want to sell your app on Apptopia, how do you expect to make money without understanding your users? It's ridiculous. It's free. It's literally, it's just free.
It is, right? And just do it. Just do it.
It's like it blows my mind, dude. It absolutely blows my mind because it's free and it adds direct value to your app, right? And so it's like, if you have a mobile app right now, you need to be using those immediately, because buyers, the apps that sell are the apps that have the most statistics around them, because it makes a buyer feel more comfortable, right? It's like, are you going to buy a used car without knowing how many miles it has on it? Of course not, right? And maybe used car is the worst example I could have given, but like the bottom line is that like, statistics make people feel more comfortable. The more comfortable they feel, A, the more money they give, B, the quicker they are to buy. The second thing is that design is really important. It's more important than I ever imagined. In fact, I now think that design is 50% of the value of an app almost.
UI, UX.
UI, UX, like, how is the gameplay? Like, what, you know, how are you using high resolution characters? Like, what is it? Because what happens is that we've done some studies, and the bottom line is that the higher the design, the higher quality of the design, the more time you and I, Rob, as mobile app users, will feel comfortable spending in the app. The more time we spend in the app, the more money you make. And so I'll tell you, like, we've actually had 3 or 4 acquisitions in the $3,000 to $5,000 range, so not like pennies, right? Where the buyer said, you know, there's some flaws with the game, but the design is unbelievable, and we can fix the other piece. And the design was the main reason for inspiring the acquisition, right? Or there's been other times where someone came in and said, your gameplay is awesome. If you update the design, we'll buy the app immediately. And so I would say, while you're updating your app, while you're building your app, do not underestimate the value in maybe paying a good artist or paying a good designer to build something, because this is a one-time cost that will add direct value. It will immediately make your asset worth more money. It is not overlooked by the user, and it's certainly not overlooked by the buyers on our site.
Good advice. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to design, it's Billy Crystal used to do this skit on Saturday Night Live. It's not how you feel, it's how you look. And you get like looks that UI, that UX brings people in it if it's engaging enough, and they will overlook a few flaws in the application because of the way that it feels in their hands and the way that they interact with it. So yeah, 50% is good, and people are starting to realize that. Before Apple came out with the iPhone and really enhanced the UI, like the first version was okay, but you know, the 3GS I think was really when they hit their stride, and the 4 and the form factor and everything. But people didn't spend any attention on UI, UX. Now people are spending a considerable amount of attention on UI, UX. It is important. It is absolutely important. It is, quite frankly, lipstick on a pig sometimes, but it makes the pig look appealing, I suppose, to other pigs.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Even with the pig.
I love pigs. I don't know. Oh man. What else do you have?
So yeah, I definitely have some more minutes. So the bottom line is that you need to sell yourself, okay? And so one of the things that frustrates me the most on my site is that we provided this section called Developer Notes, where you have a free forum to talk about your app. And the bottom line is that you, as the owner, the motherboard of this app, you know things that I can't understand from looking at your Apptopia page, from even interacting with your app. You know the ins and outs. You know the potential. You know the levels that you've designed but haven't implemented. You know all these niches, all these things that you dream about at night that you want to do but you never end up doing. Like, you know all of this stuff. And by not communicating this, you're hurting yourself, because a buyer has to imagine in their head how they make money off of your app. And so if you're not helping them get there with stats and your words, right? And your the things, the niche pieces of your app, then you're shooting yourself in the foot, right? You need to paint a picture for them. That's what it's all about. So you should absolutely be selling yourself. Other things, and this is kind of a basic one, but documentation. So as more and more apps get launched, the quality of the code will actually be something that will stop a deal. It doesn't today on our site, but I imagine in the near future, quality of code will be very, very important. So you should refactor. You should do anything you can, because the easier it is for someone to edit your app, the more likely they'll be to want to buy it, right? And again, this is just painting a picture. You're painting a picture of how they can make a lot of money when they give you, when they buy your app. Couple other things. Free is not bad. And I don't know if anyone, follows Distimo or reads kind of Distimo's mobile reports, but of the top grossing apps on both platforms, I think 40% of them are all free apps, all freemium apps. And this trend is going to start to get greater and greater as we as mobile app users start to feel more and more privileged and don't want to spend money, right? And so the bottom line is that free is not bad. And so, a lot of developers who think that they're like scared to put their app for free, it's not. It's not. Like, putting your app for free and getting a big spike in users isn't bad. It's not bad, because if as a buyer I see that users will download and use your app for free, then I'll find a way to make money off of them, right? If there's usage, if there's retention, I'll make money off you as a business person. That's not my concern. But you need to show that to people. And sometimes, putting your app for free and getting a spike is a really good way to show someone that. Couple other things, 2 things to be specific. One, and you and I talked about this even with the example of the app on our homepage, but you have to price your app realistically, right? And so you can say that I just want to throw this out there as a flyer, but then know that you're not going to sell your app, and know that you're not really trying to sell your app. You need to price it realistically, and how you need to price it. And it's very hard for people to put themselves in other people's mindsets. This is actually a skill that could even win you a job, right? But you need to put yourself in the buyer's mindset. So not only do I need to imagine, where I can take the app, I need to imagine how I make a profit. And if you're pricing your app so that in 2.5 years is my break-even point, you have straight up lost your mind. Because who knows what the App Store will even be in 2.5 years. It's only been around for 3.5 or 4 years, right? And so it's like, if you don't price your app so that a buyer can see how they logically make money within the year, then you will absolutely not make money. They will not buy your app. And so don't shoot yourself in your foot with the price, right? And the last thing, and I know I'm rattling through here, but I'm passionate about this, is that be willing to help with the transition. And this goes in 2 different ways. The first is that, if they ask for something really small, you should do it for free. And so oftentimes they're like, listen, we have this small SDK. If you could implement it for us before we buy the app, we'll be more than happy to buy the app. And so don't let your pride get in the way. If 2 hours of work gets you $5,000 sale, you should do it. It's like not taking your car to the car wash, right? Like, come on, like these are like little wins. And the second thing is that, excuse me, we see a lot of buyers who actually say, we want you to stay on. So we want to buy the app from you. We want to buy all the intellectual property, all the rights, all the revenue, everything. But we want you to help with bugs for the next 6 months. We want you to take those 3 levels that you've imagined on your notepad, and we want you to make them a reality. And oftentimes the developer being open to do this and getting paid to do it. So now they're making more money on top of it. But like them being open to being involved in the app after the sale is often like the cross on the T. Like this makes the buyer feel so much more comfortable knowing that the person's kind of staying on in some role, that I've actually seen this on multiple occasions be the deciding factor in closing out a sale.
Well, you know, it's so true. You know, all of those. It's incredible how relevant they are just to business rules in itself, right? You know, there's a base that you have to do, and this is it. I sold an app. It is the app that Citrix now uses for their mobile remote management. You know, so basically it's a desktop application that, or it's a mobile application that allows you to do like go to my PC and PC Anywhere. We sold them the foundation, the technology for that, and we sold it to them, and then we spent 9 months implementing it for them, right? Like,
and they wouldn't have sold it if you didn't.
Lines
do that,
of code
right?
mean nothing to them. It's like, okay, we own it, we love it, we do it, but look, now that we bought it from you, we need you to start. We need you to make us familiar and comfortable with the code. So it was a condition of the sale, and we're like, yep, no problem. We're in there, and now it's the base of the code that they're using on all this great software. We sold it to them about 4 years ago. So, you know, you have to do it. It works, and it works. And we sold it for more than $5,000. Let me tell you. But we made way more.
Citrix, right? They have money to.
They do, but we made way more in the consulting gig after that than we did in the sale, and the sale was a good sale. So, man, you know, I'm with you on all of those points. Great points, Jonathan. Now that I've monopolized your entire afternoon, I need to know where we can send people. So they should obviously go to apptopia.com. Is that the only place you want me to send people?
I mean, yeah, you should go to apptopia.com, but more so, you should just respect that while we are running a very credible professional business that's making people money, we're still young. And so we answer emails like within minutes of you sending them, right? So like my email is jon@apptopia.com. And, you know, if you want valuation help, email valuation@apptopia.com. And just utilize these emails that we like publicize throughout our site, because it's like you're really reaching a human. It just helps us organize our time, right? And we really love this stuff, and we know how important education is. We know that education is everything right now. And so if you're a buyer and you want to like get our opinion on an app, or you're a seller, you want to get your opinion on the valuation, you'd be insane not to reach out to us, because we just have so much unique experience, and we're just giving it away for free right now.
Well, I take John up on his offer, jon@apptopia.com. If you've ever considered it, and if you just want to kick the tires, if you just want to see if there's any value to the application that you've got sitting there doing nothing in the App Store, not generating any downloads or any revenue for you whatsoever, go. You never know what a relationship with John might do, because in the back of his head, a month down the road, he might bump into somebody who's looking for your app, and a strategic buy is better than a revenue buy because it enhances both. So think about it. Just reach out to John at jon@apptopia.com. And this has been great. I knew it would be. I knew there's a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm about this. I can't thank you enough for doing this, John. I'm really glad that we were able to get this done. And I know that there was tremendous value had from anybody who out there is kind of alone and suffering the low revenue challenges of this app economy. There is hope. It's at Apptopia. Go and take a look at it. Be a part of this. Sell your app. Reach out to John. Please.
Oh, I love this, man. This was so much fun. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure,
Seriously.
totally. We've been speaking with John Kay, who is the co-founder and COO of Apptopia. Go to apptopia.com. Email him at jon@apptopia.com if you have any questions. I want to thank you, thank him, thank you for being a part of this. I really appreciate that. Guys out there, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, the fact that you brought this into your headphones or onto your screen I appreciate so much. Thank you for making this part of your day. Reach out to me at untether@gmail.com. I'd love to hear some feedback, some comments. Have you used John's service? Are you going to use John's service? A little hesitant? Reach out. will convince you one way or another. I will definitely respond to my email, maybe not in minutes like John does, but I do respond to my emails. Please reach out. I appreciate the fact that you guys are doing this, and if there's anything that you need from me, you know how to reach me. Until next time, we'll see you on Untether.tv. Thanks, John. Really